We continue now with the sort of UK theme and moving on in terms of not only Stephen as Chief Executive of Becta, but also I have to say that probably my first ever meeting with Stephen was a conversation over whether or not we would be able to utilize the handheld devices that we both wanted to be able to use within the civil service. But it wasn't just at that stage that they were shut down at 11 o'clock at night, as Jim's referred to. It was the fact that the civil service itself, the whole systems, wouldn't actually let us use what we wanted to. We've moved on since there, not least because of Stephen's efforts, and indeed now Stephen's in a position where he can really begin to influence what is happening not just within the department, but also beyond that in the system as a whole. Stephen Crowne.
Thanks very much, Doug, and good morning, everyone. We're absolutely delighted to be supporting this event. It's a very exciting occasion. And can I just say, it's also fantastic to have a ministerial champion, as we do for this whole area, as Doug has already said, and Jim has made clear, someone who deeply understands, not just through his own use of technology, but the kind of challenge that we face in this digital age. I thought what I'd do, quite briefly, is really three things this morning. Firstly, to say something about where we are as Becta in our system leadership role. Secondly, what we're currently thinking about in terms of the next stage of the strategy for making the most effective use of technology to support learning and skills. And then thirdly, to link that back really to the whole business of handheld learning, personalised access to technology, because I think there's a strong link and a strong story to tell there. So firstly, just on the where we are, many of you will know that for the first time in 2005, the government produced what I think is an incredibly ambitious vision for technology in learning, a system-wide approach, and it's very important to stress that. We're talking about 100% of the system and of the learners in the system. With four key objectives, each of which in its own right is very challenging. Firstly, to transform teaching and learning. Questions don't get much bigger than that. Engage hard to reach learners. I mean, this is a government absolutely committed to 100% of the cohort. Building an open and accessible system, and at the same time achieving all those efficiencies and greater effectiveness that we know the best use of technology can deliver. And that means hundreds of millions of pounds saved for reinvestment in the system. So big ambitions there. And Becta was charged last year with leading that effort. And to do that, what we've done is been through a whole process with all of our partners. A lot of organisations have a role to play in this, to be clear about what we should do and how we should do it together. And we've come up with what you see here, a scorecard, effectively. And it tells us three basic things. Firstly, on the left-hand side, we have to operate in two critical areas. One, in supporting and developing the capacity of the workforce, the institutions, the leaders, to make the best use of technology. They need to understand the potential. They need to be the intelligent customer in terms of procuring services and applying those. And then, of course, we need to work with the industry to help them to develop and adapt and make an offer which is fit for purpose, provides the efficiencies we need, provides the resilience, the industry strength capability that we need going forward. But it's not enough to do that. We need to be able to measure the results of that activity on the right-hand side of the scorecard in terms of the outcomes and benefits for learners and children. And at the system level, to be able to measure efficiency and effectiveness and the value for money. The good news is the evidence base in both of these areas is increasingly strong. We have an increasingly convincing story to tell about how the right technologies used in the right ways do produce benefits for learners. They do produce efficiencies and greater effectiveness right across the system. And it is that business case, I believe, that's going to drive the more widespread adoption of effective technology right across the system. Now, this is a huge agenda, so in Becta what we've been doing is trying to prioritise on some of the key levers, the key areas that we think need early attention and early movement. We need to make our systems safe. We've got to build confidence amongst parents and others that we will protect their children. Personalisation we've heard a lot about. We need to help teachers, other practitioners understand the benefits technology can bring as they explore the different dimensions of personalisation. And particularly in this next CSR period, which will feel tighter for schools than the previous one, we need to realise those efficiency benefits. There are other objectives too. Those are just some examples of the areas that we're working hard in. I don't think you can really read this. The message in terms of where we are is, I think, a good one. In terms of kit, we continue on a favourable trajectory in terms of the number of PCs per secondary pupil. We're up to 1 to 3.6. Now, that in itself doesn't tell us anything except the trend's in the right direction. It doesn't tell us anything about effective use, of course. But other evidence does support the contention that our practitioners are increasingly adept at actually using the technology to support learning effectively. That is a good story and one we should definitely celebrate. And when you put that in an international context, in Europe certainly, lead the way in many respects. This is a chart that shows the percentage of teachers with access, competence and the confidence to use the internet and computers in classroom situations, and we're well ahead in those respects. So lots to celebrate there. This country definitely seen as a leader, and part of my job is to say, well, we set these incredible ambitions in harnessing technology. Are we really making the kind of progress that we owe to the learners who will benefit from all of this? And I think there are some big challenges that we face. We know from the evidence that the most effective use of technology happens in those institutions which we call immature. They're confident, capable, from top to bottom. They really understand how technology can benefit their learners. But building immaturity is a slow business. And I think there's some real challenges about how we can accelerate that. It's a key performance indicator for Becta itself, and I think for the whole system. There are still some technology hurdles. We've got a highly fragmented system. Building a really resilient infrastructure, interoperability, making it more agile, making it more responsive to changing needs and priorities, still a key challenge for us. And I think the core area, and we'll come on to this a bit more, is about learning and teaching. I mean, as a crude generalization, on the whole, we're still using technology primarily to enhance and enrich existing practice. And yet we know from the most effective practice that it's when you get into the business of developing approaches to learning and teaching using technology that you get the real benefits. So rather than it simply mechanizing existing process, actually using technology to change process, to engage learners more effectively, will be critical in the next stage. And that practice exists, but as other areas of our highly fragmented system, actually getting the ability to share and build on best practice right across the system is a big, big challenge. And of course, finally, we have still the big challenge of learner access. We are about 100% of learners. We are about reaching out into communities that are deprived, who wouldn't otherwise have access to these powerful tools. It's very important, hence Jim's emphasis really on home access, that everybody feels engaged with this. So that's kind of where we are. Where we want to get to, I think, is a very important question. And we think the time's right now, with a new structure of departments, with developing strategies, with ministers committed to this area, we think it's right to reflect on what we should be aiming for next. And we've kind of characterized this into phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1's what we're in now. It's about essentially building the core capability of the system, the infrastructure right across the system that we can build on. and then ensuring that that technology is used more systematically to add value to current educational practice. But as I've rather implied, that gets you so far. Phase 2, and this is what we need to work on now, is how we use the potential of technology to ensure that educational experience matches different learner needs, is much more responsive to individuals, particularly young people growing up in the digital age, and supporting the broader effort to make the whole system more user-focused, user-responsive, learners, their parents, carers, and employers indeed. So that's a big challenge for us. And we've engaged, many of you will be involved in this, in a process of talking to some of the experts around the system to ensure we get a rich input in terms of the challenge, what we're trying to achieve. And I'd just like to share with you 2 of those inputs in the last few weeks. The first from Diana Oblinger, Vice President of EduCores in the States. Really powerful message about how education systems for the future need to be responsive both to what learners are now bringing with them, their preferred ways of learning, their experience in the rest of their lives in the use of technology, particularly social networking, the power of those Web 2.0 tools that have taken off so hugely. It's important that we realize the full benefit of that in education terms. But also, of course, secondly, the whole world of work that they'll be going into, which is developing very rapidly and will put an enormous premium on the agility of young members of that workforce working in distributed knowledge systems, their networking abilities, and their ability to learn very quickly for changing circumstances. Big challenge there. And then another important input from Mike Sharples from the University of Nottingham, making sure we're building our view of technology on a sophisticated understanding of successful learning. His emphasis on the 3-fold C's, as it were, construction, problem solving, applying knowledge to experience, conversation, the interaction between learner and teacher, and enabling learners to take more control, to feel more ownership of the whole business of learning, not just devices. So these kinds of inputs are very important for us. And in thinking about the future, we've really got 5 key themes, starting quite deliberately with the learner perspective, the learner experience. Very important that we understand that and build on that. Secondly, of course, critically, the whole economic context, the global competitiveness environment that we're in, making sure that we're building the right skills, the right attitudes through the use of technology. Of course, very important to understand technology opportunities, trends and development, and we're talking very much today about one very exciting and fast-moving bit of the picture, but there are many other aspects which have great potential for education, which we really need to get behind and understand. You need to take a medium-term view when you're talking about the whole of our system. It cannot move as fast as we'd like. We need to encourage it to make the right investment decisions based on what we know is coming over the horizon. Fourthly, and of course, this critical area of understanding learning and teaching best practice and building that through the system. And finally, and this is critical for government, I think, making sure that we're using technology to support the big system changes that are underway now, education system reform. And the strong driver is this inclusivity that ministers are really serious about. The notion that not only are we about raising average standards, as it were, but we're closing the gap between the lowest achievers and the rest. We're making sure no one is being left behind. That's just to say there is a process by which we will produce a revised strategy which will agree with ministers, but I can assure you now it will include those 5 key areas that I've outlined. I hope it's obvious, really, as we then turn to how it fits with the subject of today. I think there are real common themes coming out which personalised access will help support. it's quite clear that personal access to technology does support this vision of learning that we have, enabling learners to engage, to be enthused about learning beyond the confines of the school, taking it into the home, enabling them to build on their own areas of interest in the rest of their digital lives, if you like, and then helping them to build those skills of independent learning and critical thought that will be absolutely vital in future, and helping families to become much more systematically engaged in supporting and leading learning. Very important potential there. I just want to spend a few minutes, and this is with thanks to Tony Richardson and Martin Blaze, on the learning side, and give you some illustrations. This is quite a useful chart. I don't know if you can all read it. Basically, all it says is we're in the learning business, and what we want to do is make sure we use technology to support vertically deeper learning, horizontally more personalised, more active learning. And the 5 E's you see there are a bit of a journey in terms of the use of technology to support progressively deeper and more personalised learning. I'm going to show you 3 video clips now which take the last 3 of those E's, starting with enhanced learning. Just to give you, you might not agree with this, but just to give you what we think are some quite good illustrations of the use of technology, handheld technology, to develop that kind of deeper and more personalised learning. Let's give it a go.
We connect first, don't close the connect screen, then go to programs and launch Synchronise. When we come to do the question, it's important that you have a discussion about it. Okay? And we're looking for lots of different methods, because obviously we want to see the responses in Synchronise. Because you won't all come up with the same way of doing it. But what we're looking to see, because we can use this, we'll be able to see, won't we, everybody's methods.
Because it's a square, all the sides are the same size. So if you times 16 by 4, it equals 64.
What I'd like us to do is, I want to receive all of your files. So along the bottom of your screen, you'll have the coloured squares, the synchronised symbol. Okay? You need to click Submit File. I've received all of your files then. You've sent all of those files to me. Okay, and you can see, look, they've been saved to my laptop. And if I wanted to, I could send your files to everybody else.
That's Stowe Heath School, pupils sharing their workings, helping each other to understand thought processes, arriving at solutions collaboratively. Quite a good example, I think, of enhancement of learning. Let's move on to the next E, extension.
Right, can everybody please open up the Wild Key programme in the Start menu? Great, some of you have done it already. I've got some pictures of animals that I want you to have a practice on before we start looking at the real things.
It's Henrika Saindrylenta, starfish.
It's a shell. Shell. Well, let's click on shell.
I want to find a crab.
Is the shell tube-like, hinged, dull, or snail-like?
I think it's a dull, isn't it?
Dull, yeah.
Conical and rough, conical and smooth, or flat and smooth. Conical and smooth. Or periwinkle.
So, clearly extending learning opportunities, in that case, on a field trip. And finally, empowering.
The essence is about children being able to access their work anywhere. It's about anytime, anywhere learning. The flexibility of the PDAs for us is that children are able to take them out of the classroom. They're in ownership of the device so that they can take the machine home, they can show it to their parents, and they can work with their parents on it. It's about increased motivation and engagement.
It's really useful because you can take it everywhere and you don't have to sit on the computer all day. It's portable and you use it for loads of different things. It's got Bluetooth and camera and video, and I really enjoy it at school. It's good fun.
I'm finding he's bringing a lot more schoolwork home. He's showing us things that he's doing at school in the day, especially science, and he's bringing it home, he's sharing it with the whole family. It's practical, it's portable, we can use it in different places and we can take it on holiday, and we're not just stuck to the computer.
I think that home access point, that home involvement point is critical. Jim, very keen on promoting parental involvement, and tools like this can be incredibly powerful in linking parents even more closely into education. I'd like to thank Wolverhampton Local Authority, Dave Wiley and Stow Heath School in particular for allowing us to use those clips. Becta, of course, is evaluating the Learn to Go project, Bristol's Handy Learning project, and I think there are two big conclusions coming out of the early results of that. Firstly, that there are clear benefits, and there's no doubt, just talking to the people involved in those projects, you can see that, but actually there are measurable and clear benefits in terms of motivation and engagement, a much stronger sense of ownership of learning and independence in managing learning, and critically, I think, the link between formal and informal learning seems to be very powerful. The but is you can't do this overnight. It does depend on a degree of immaturity in terms of institutional readiness, on the supply side, preparing the ground in terms of CDP and professional development. All of those things need to be in place if we're to realise the full benefits of this kind of development. And it just takes us back to that point I was making earlier, that immaturity in the system is absolutely critical to realising these kinds of benefits. I want to finish by saying something about this challenge around personalisation. Personalisation's got a bit of a bad press in terms of kind of a policy headline, because it's quite a sophisticated concept and it's kind of so intrinsic to what educators are about. It's quite hard to crystallise it into simple messages. But I don't think there's any doubt that from the demand side, our young learners, and indeed older learners too, will increasingly expect a more responsive system in the way that they expect responsiveness in their everyday lives, the way that purchasing, the consumer society has become a much more responsive environment, so they will expect that of us in education. But to build that degree of responsiveness and personalisation, we will need to make sure that we're using technology to the full. So the 5 critical things that I can see for this are, one, certainly ensuring that institutional maturity and system maturity continues to develop, and we still have really an unacceptable number of institutions who do not really see this as one of their core priorities. Secondly, continuing to build an understanding of what works in learning and teaching and how you can use technology to support that. We need to do more and more of that, and to help spread the practice much more effectively. We need to continue the dialogue with the supply side to ensure that you can buy, as it were, with confidence, knowing that what you'll be buying will be there for the long term, it will provide you with reliable service, and then it will be adaptable and developable to meet new and changing needs. And of course, there's a whole agenda of skills in the workforce, and there's still plenty of evidence that although we have many excellent practitioners, there's a substantial proportion of teachers and others who feel they lack confidence in this area, and we need to help build that. And above all, it's about understanding what's possible and what works. And one of the great things about conferences like this is it brings together enthusiasts and others who've got rich experience of use And it's helping to spread those messages around effective use, I think, that will help drive us forward. So I hope you have an enjoyable rest of the conference. Thank you for inviting me. We're certainly up for our leadership role in leading these changes, but we can only do it in partnership with a whole range of people who themselves share this system leadership role. Thank you very much.